Congratulations on getting this far into making your game. While all of the pieces that we've been creating are quite simple, altogether it makes up one quite sophisticated game. When you have a lot of different parts though, sometimes you need a way to bring it all together, especially for functions like saving information and persistent information that you need to carry over into other scenes. So in this video what we're going to be creating is a game manager. And what the manager does is it handles all of these game events, sort of like a state machine, but a little bit more simple than a state machine, because this game isn't that complicated that it needs one. Okay, so if I come up to game object, create empty, let's call this game object game manager, and we'll add a component of type new script. And the script that we're creating will be called persistent manager. Make sure it is of type C# and create an add. Okay, now come to our assets folder, move the script into the scripts folder, come to the scripts folder, double click to open the script. Now at the top here you can see the frameworks that we're using. As we build out the functionality in this persistent manager, we're going to be using some additional frameworks. We're not using all of them straight away, but I'm just bringing them in now to save us the trouble. Just to give you an idea of what these are used for, this one here is used for serialization. So when you're encrypting and decrypting files, this is a common system framework that you will use. System I/O, so input output, so this is for saving and retrieving files. Scene management, so if we're going to transition from this scene to another scene, you'll need to include scene management. Okay, so our persistent manager is a game object that's going to stay active for as long as the game's active. So what does that mean? That means when you transition from this scene to another scene, this game object will not be destroyed in that transition. Now what we also need to handle is if it tries to initialize a new game object of persistent manager, we want to kill that object off and keep the manager that was already in place. The way we're going to achieve all this is by using a singleton pattern. If you haven't heard of a singleton pattern before, I highly recommend looking it up. It's a very simple way to persist a game object. So start out, we have a public static variable of type persistent manager. So this variable will represent itself and it's going to be called data store. The start function gets called a little bit too late for us. We want to interact at the awake function. So that'll be void awake. And then in there we're going to check if there is already a data store object. So if data store is equal to null, so there is no object, we're going to tag this object as don't destroy on load and pass in the current game object, so the persistent manager. We're going to set the data store equal to this game object. And I'm just going to take this line out because we're not using it just yet. Okay, and else if there is already a data store and it's not equal to this object, we're going to destroy this object. So that will be the case when you transition to a new scene, this tries to trigger its awake method, but there's already one in place that isn't going to be equal to the current data store. Okay, so there we've just handled the persistence of this object. Now knowing that this object will survive from scene to scene, what sort of things do you want it to hold? We can make public instance variables available to cover anything you would like this class to hold for you. So here I'm just asking it to hold the current level ID as an integer, and it's public so other classes will be able to access it. And the data that I'm going to persist is the number of gems collected and the highest level completed. Okay, make sure you save your script. Come back to Unity and let's also make this a prefab now by dragging the game manager into the prefabs folder. Okay, if we come back to our scripts folder and then onto collect gem, We can now tell our persistent game manager that we collected a gem. So it'll be game manager .datastore.gems collected plus equal to 1. So that will be persistent manager, the name of the script, .datastore.gems collected plus equal to 1. So that will add a number to the current number. Please note also that it's only when you're using this singleton design pattern that you're able to access properties directly like this. In all other circumstances, you should use the getComponent function. Okay, come back to Unity, run your game. Let's have a look at the game manager. So you can see over here the number of gems collected. If I collect a gem, you'll see that number has gone up. If I find some more gems and collect those as well, the number keeps going up. Okay, now if I was to stop this game and then start it again, the gem count will reduce back to 0 again. In the next video, we'll talk about saving and loading data so that you can keep the number of gems and add to it each time you play the game.